briefing room, and there's one you passed on the way in. Is this a sprinkler building? Yes, it is. This is going to be a trivia question, but that's not even a trivia question. It's something maybe Matt will talk on later. But the roof type that this has is called bowstring construction, which is fine for a fire down here. But if a fire ever gets up into there, these roofs collapse really easy. So this is one of the only bowstring constructions we have on the coast, which makes it very susceptible to early roof failure. So those are the type of things that I like certain members to look at is where the fire protection, all this kind of thing. You're not going to really attempt by the roof construction, but Matt might touch a little bit. That's one of his specialties. He's not going deep into it today, but that exits. There's double doors goes right here, and then the way you came in, and if you wanted to make a right, go out through that one room. But those are our exits, and we do have some people with mobility issues, so we want to make sure we help them out, get their equipment out of the way of the aisles and that if we have any kind of emergency. Today we got shake and bake, is that what we're calling that? And this is the third annual shake and bake, and thank you for coming today. We're going to try to go all the way through it without a break, but obviously the restrooms are down there. We have to be out by noon, so we're going to get the show going. We still got people filtering in. If we have an earthquake, what are we supposed to do? That's the wrong answer. Right? So, as you look up above you, right, gravity is what we're worried about in an earthquake, right? So this stuff is kind of engineered to defeat gravity, but to send down the earthquake, right? So you want to cover the back of your neck and things like that. So that's what you want to do. Then when the ground stops shaking, you're not going to run, but you might want to exit the building, right? What's going to happen if you run during an earthquake? You're going to be in the jump house with the big fat kid next to you bouncing you, right? So that's why we don't run in an earthquake, okay? So Matt's got a lot of things he's going to go through for that. And also, I mean, there's been a lot of big earthquakes around the world lately. If we have a 7.1 earthquake over water within 250 kilometers of a breakpoint that's near us, which means any earthquake from Eureka to Pismo Beach over water will generate a tsunami alert that comes to your phone. It's not going to reach you here. You do not need to worry about a tsunami because you're not in the tsunami zone. Anything local in California will affect beaches, but not the zone you see for maximum evacuation, right? I just want to stress that because I don't know if Matt's going to touch on this, steal his thunder, but I worry about people's reactions to emergency than what the emergency is, right? So we want to educate everybody so that they know the actions they need to take to be safe and not out there with the masses and things like that. So we live on the coast, we live in an area where we're subject to natural disasters, and preparing for it gives you the tools to be able to deal with it in a logical way and thinking about it in advance. I think the room's empty here because a lot of people don't like to think about bad things, right? But I thank you for coming here and doing this. So Matt has a good history. I actually learned, I didn't realize he was a Baltimore firefighter before he came to California, where he went to work for NASA, and he got put on the USAR task force, which just recently went to Columbia, right? So he was on that for 23 years, 20 years as a rescue technician. So he's a good expert for us to have on the coast, and he also knows a little about cybersecurity as well, which is a threat to us as well, but we're not covering that today. So I thank Matt for what he's done for adding to our module on construction and search and rescue, and I'm going to hand the mic over to him, and if he has any questions that come from you that, there's a hand up already.
Oh, Matt, what was the right answer for earthquake? Do we have to just crouch on the floor here?
Yep, probably there is just the seats and put your hands over to protect your neck, right? Or duck under the person next to you so they don't. All right, Matt, go ahead. You can get a better description.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming, everybody. I know Saturday morning, there's a lot of things that compete for our attention. I really appreciate that you all came here to do some disaster preparation and training. I got a really good intro from Chief Cosgrave, so I don't have to go too far into it. This is a task force drill we did at the Stanford Linear Accelerator, pulling a dummy out of a very tight space. It was a lot of fun. So the purpose of community training, community survival training, I think the most important thing to remember is the same thing they tell you on the airline when you get on. You got to put your own mask on first. And so for CERT, we teach a lot about how to help the community, how to get out there, search houses door to door, make sure your community members are safe. But you're not even going to walk out your front door if you don't feel like your family is safe and you aren't uninjured. And so this course is mostly about how to make sure that you're in good enough shape and prepared well enough to help others after. And a couple of important disclaimers, especially in the age of the internet. I am not a structural engineer, even though I will be giving some basic structural engineering stuff. I'm definitely not a geologist, even though I'm going to talk about faults. So I'm probably going to say one or two things that are probably wrong. Don't flame me on the internet for that. Don't email my boss and tell her I'm an idiot, because she already knows. And she'll depress you by telling you all the other dumb stuff I've done. So this is a starting point. It's community, education, and resources. You'll probably want to go do more research on your own after this. The basics of this class, if you just left after this slide, what you would want to know is community is your strongest asset. And I have that up front because there's a lot of prepper communities on the internet, and you'll go there and they'll be like, the most important thing is to have food and guns. And there's all kinds of bad advice about how to be the only survivor of the zombie apocalypse. And every time I see one of those forums, I think being the only survivor sounds super lonely. I would rather be having a block party with my neighbors and, chilling out, playing some music, having a barbecue. So community is the number one thing that you need after a disaster. It's not being the only one with food. It's making sure everybody has food because you did pre-planning. And as a rule of thumb, especially in a community that's a little bit more isolated like Coastside, you want to prepare for about 72 hours, 3 days of being able to just completely be on your own. No power, no running water, no cell phones. It takes a few days for everybody to get their stuff together, even the professionals. Chief Cosgrave mentioned I was on a FEMA USAR team. They would deploy us to anywhere in the country to do rescue. Show of hands, how many people think we can get to Florida after a hurricane in 4 hours? How about 8 hours? 12? I got some 12s. 24. So got some, I have 72? So we would usually get there in about 24 hours. But then we would get there with 2 18-wheeler tractor trailers full of gear, about 120 people, 6 dogs. Then we had to set up camp somewhere. We had to get all our stuff out. We had to get orders. By the time professional rescuers from outside of your community get to you and get established and actually have water tankers brought in, it's going to be about 3 days. That's just how long it takes to get even a professional team going. And we were on a 4-hour pager. Anytime we were paged, we had to be in Menlo Park within 4 hours with our go bag ready to go. Still took the other 20 to get there. Oh, and of course, the most important rule of all, number 5, don't be a dummy. So if you have shaking or a tsunami or a wildfire or some disaster and the moment of shock is over and you are not yet injured, your job is to not get injured from that point forward, because the hospitals, if they're still functioning, or the doctors, they're all going to be overwhelmed with the already injured people. And your job is to not add to the problem. So think first before you do things. Just take a step back and think. Pre-planning is key, and I'm going to focus mostly on earthquakes and wildfires because that's the 2 big things that we've got going on here. For earthquakes, the most important pre-planning things you can do, strap furniture and appliances. When you see those, has anybody ever seen, at Home Depot, they sell those earthquake bracing kits that's like a nylon strap that has a sticky part on both ends? You're supposed to stick one part to the drywall, stick the other part to a tall shelf. How many people think those work? They actually work great. And the reason is, when this shaking happens, you got a tall bookshelf. It's going to shake a little, and then it's going to shake a little more, and then it's going to shake a little more. Each additional shake, it goes out over its own center of gravity until it falls over. Those little sticky nylon straps are just there to keep it from going that first time over its center of gravity and getting a sway going. They're way better than nothing. So even if you're renting an apartment and you're not allowed to put holes in the walls, or you don't have the tools to strap something to the wall, even those little sticky strap things to strap a bookshelf to the wall are way better than nothing. And that's one thing that people are surprised by. It's basically being held to the wall by your paint. But it still does a pretty good job. If you have gas to your house, getting a gas shutoff wrench and just zip tying it to your gas line is good prep. And then you'll want to stockpile some supplies for afterwards, which we're going to talk about a lot at the end of this. For wildfires, again, preparation is super key. Oh, by the way, I'm going to publish these slides on the internet, and I'll give a link out, and then you can just all download the slides. So clearing brush around the house, I'm going to talk about that a little more in the prep section. Assessing your building materials, air filters for the wildfire smoke are something you can have around. This is the big important one. When somebody says you should probably evacuate because there's a wildfire around, and you're looking around and the wildfire is far away still, you should probably still evacuate, right, Chief? Once they tell you you need to evacuate, that's the time to do it, not waiting until the fire's nearby. Because wildfire actually moves pretty fast. And on that, you should know 2 or more evacuation routes, which for us in Coastside is pretty easy. There's 3. Pick 2. Another thing a lot of people neglect, again in the planning phase, written down plans. There's nothing worse than going through an emergency and then sitting there in the what do I do next phase when you could have calmly discussed it with everyone ahead of time. The Red Cross has, you can go Google for Red Cross disaster plan, and they have templates you can fill out. And you can just do 1 page each week for 3 weeks around the dinner table. Say, okay, well, what do we need to have? Do we have insurance? We need to write down our insurance information. If your house gets trashed and your computers are all trashed, how do you know what your insurance policy number was when you're going to start filing claims to get temporary hotel lodging? You can write all of those things down. You can put them in a Google Doc and save the doc to your phone, because you'll probably have your phone with you when you leave. But having it written down somewhere is really important, especially where do you meet if separated? So I don't think I'm going to be lucky enough to have the big earthquake happen when I'm at home with my wife and kid and we're all together. Even if I'm home, my kid's going to be out with their friends somewhere. And so if we can't call each other on the phone and we don't know where each other are at that moment, where are we going to meet? How are we going to get back together? So what I did for my family was I took all of this information. How do we communicate? We sat at the dinner table, we thought about it, we wrote it down, and then everybody saved a copy to their phone. So we all knew, at the time we lived in Sunnyvale, that if there was an earthquake and we couldn't get a hold of each other, we would go to Ponderosa Park and we would try to find each other there. Or if that didn't work and everything was disaster, we would try to go to my parents' house in Hollister and get a message to them and then trade messages for them. So there's all kinds of things you should do. I get asked often whether earthquake insurance is worth it. So I added it here because it's a frequently asked question. Only you can really decide if you should have earthquake insurance. Kind of a personal question. I think, did you have a hand? Oh, okay. I do. I decided I would get earthquake insurance at some point, and that point was when the state of California started backing the earthquake fund so that I knew the insurance company wouldn't just declare bankruptcy and refuse to pay my claim. That was when I decided I would get earthquake insurance. So who's on the coast on an average day? On any random day, sorry, we had a question? Oh, okay, yes, you are. Yes, we're all on the coast on an average day. Which public safety professionals are on the coast on an average day? Useful for you to know, I think we have about 30,000 people in 50 square miles on the coast. Those are served by 10 fire personnel, 9 paid firefighters in 3 stations and 1 battalion chief. So we got 10 firefighters on duty. Coastside also amazingly has, and I'm a part of this team and I really love it, so biased, we have a volunteer fire component too. So there's between 8 and 16 volunteer firefighters here on the coast as well, and we can get on the backup fire engines and operate those too. So at most, for the 30,000 people among 50 square miles, we have these 3 fire stations and I'm going to say 15 people to operate them, probably. We will also have 7 sheriff's officers, and that's it. So that's good, but that's not going to go very far if there's widespread damage. So we also have the CERT program. There's 560 currently CERT volunteers. A lot of you are CERT volunteers. I recognize you. That is going to comprise the bulk of the help in the first week after something happens here. It's going to be the CERT volunteers locally in the community, backed by the few public safety professionals that we have. We also do have 1 ambulance, and it'll depend on whether that ambulance is currently taking someone over the hill to a hospital when the earthquake strikes as to whether it's here or not. So a lot of truck beds with mattresses in them are going to become ambulances. All right, we'll start with earthquakes and tsunamis. That's the first thing we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk a little bit about how they work, as well as how to prepare for them. So California has lots of faults, especially if you ask my parents, they live in Tennessee. We got a lot of faults here. And you know, the big ones, right? We know the San Andreas fault. That's the one that runs north-south throughout all of California, all the way down to Los Angeles. That's the famous one. That's where the Loma Prieta shake was. There's actually the Hayward fault. And if you look at the probability maps that the USGS puts together, San Andreas is relatively 22% likely to have a rupture in the next 30 years. Over here, the Hayward fault is actually a much more dangerous position. And the Calaveras fault over here is very dangerous in the East Bay as well. Basic measurement, we abandoned the Richter scale a long time ago because it was too easy to say. Now we have the moment magnitude scale that works kind of similarly. It's a logarithm. So a 6.0 earthquake, if you go to a 6.1, it's about twice as strong as the 6.0. A 6.2 is about 3 times as strong. But then a 7.0 is 10 times as much energy released as a 6. And 8 is 100 times as much energy released as a 6. So it kind of hockey sticks up. The moment magnitude scale measures how much energy is released by an earthquake, not necessarily the intensity of the shaking. The intensity of the shaking is determined by geology, the soil that your house sits on, the fault type, the foundation type, the material your house is built out of. And one particularly important thing is liquefaction. That's the propensity for the soil to become semi-liquid when an earthquake's waves pass through it. And there's a map. Again, these slides will be public, so you can just find the slides and click the link. There's a map that the state of California produces that'll tell you if you're on a liquefaction zone or not, or if you're on stronger soil.
Are any of our faults subduction versus slip?
I'm going to cover that. Are there any faults that are subduction versus slip strike? So, I didn't plant her, I swear. So there's also 2 kinds of faults, and people get these confused sometimes. The 2 primary kinds of faults, this is a slip strike fault. This is when 2 tectonic plates are moving against each other kind of horizontally. They're rubbing against each other as they move. You tend to find slip strike faults intercontinentally, so within the United States. If you have any Midwestern friends who make fun of you for earthquakes, by the way, look up the New Madrid fault, because straight down the middle of our country is a massive earthquake fault that can produce larger quakes than anything in California, but it just doesn't, except for every 200 years or so, and they're way past due. So there's a big slip strike fault right through the middle of the Mississippi, and they're going to make fun of California and then be like, where'd all our houses go? These tend to produce quakes in the high 6, low 7s. The Great Quake in San Francisco that leveled the whole city was a 7.8. Loma Prieta in 1989 was a 6.9. And they produce a lot of shaking, but they don't produce the tsunamis. Tsunamis are typically produced by what we call subduction faults. These are where the continental plates, so like North America versus Asia, begin colliding into one another, and then one of the plates is actually subducting under it. It's being pushed down into the core of the Earth and melted, and returning to the core of the Earth in a subduction plate. And what happens in a subduction fault is the fault that's on top will get grabbed by the fault that's being subducted and kind of gradually pulled downward. And then when a subduction fault releases, when the tensional releases, it pops back up again. And that's that shake moment that produces those giant tsunami-type waves. These tend to be in the high 8, low 9 range. So the Alaska earthquake in 1964 was a 9.2. And the reason most of you have never heard about it is It was in Alaska in 1964, in a really rural part, and it produced a 900-foot tsunami wave up a desolate coastal area where nobody lived. And you can still see the difference in the tree growth where the wave height hit. The Indonesia quake in 2004, the Phuket tsunami that killed, I think, 200,000 people was a 9.1. We do have an somewhat adjacent subduction fault. The closest subduction fault to us is the Cascadia subduction zone. That covers from Alaska, comes around down, covers all of Washington and Oregon, and then it stops right around Eureka, which is way NorCal. So if the Cascadia subduction zone goes off and has a big one, Eureka is going to get maybe 5 minutes notice before a tsunami hits that area. But we will actually get quite a bit of notice. Because remember, energy waves. A tsunami is energy waves traveling through water. And it takes some time for that to happen. So for the SF Bay Area, we're about 90 minutes away from whatever tsunami would get released by the Cascadia subduction zone. So like Chief Cosgrave said earlier, if you get a tsunami alert based on an earthquake that came off here, you got more than 5 minutes, right? You can look and see what's going on and then figure out your evacuation route. Hopefully you've pre-planned it. Now that wave height when it reaches us would include at peak about a 10 to 20 foot high tsunami inundation wave. So that would cover Miramar Beach. It would put most of Princeton by the sea underwater. You would need to take it very seriously. But, and again, worst case scenarios, right? The worst case possible scenario they've thought of is about 10 to 20 feet of inundation in those low-lying areas on the beach from a 9.0 plus in the Cascadia subduction zone. Mostly, what happens is the tsunamis are less distant or they produce a shorter wave. Chief, what's the wave height of the one tsunami that hit us, what was it, 10 years ago, something like that? I think a foot?
I didn't notice it.
Yeah. So it moved some boats in the harbors up at about a 1 foot wave, barely noticeable. And remember, a 10-foot high tsunami wave, I think during storm season, the wave heights are usually, 8, 9 feet? Something like that. So these areas are in a lot higher risk than the SF Bay area here. The other thing about tsunamis is when you get that tsunami alert, if it's coming from this area, it's going to travel in a wave. It's going to hit Eureka, then it's going to hit whatever south of that, then it's going to hit whatever south of that. The great part about the era we live in right now is if you want to see if an earthquake in this region produced a significant wave height, you just go on social media and then hashtag Seattle, and then you wait for people in Seattle to take videos of it and post it online, and then you get to see how big the wave was in Seattle, and then you got about an hour between Seattle to here, and you can see. And that's exactly what I did the last time we got a tsunami alert. I just watched Seattle social media and it was nothing. And I was like, well, it's not going to be 20 feet high here if it wasn't 20 feet high in Seattle. So during an earthquake, Chief Cosgrave covered this. What do? Drop, cover, and hold on. Get under something sturdy, hold on to it so that you don't move or it doesn't move, and cover the back of your head and your neck. Does anybody remember, I remember, being told to go stand in a doorway? Stand in a doorway! Why did they tell us to stand in a doorway? Because the structure of a door has what you call a header over here. This is a heavy structural piece. That advice came from experts who went and studied a devastating earthquake in Mexico City in the 80s. And they noticed that of all of the collapsed buildings, the door frames and the doorways were still standing upright. And they said, oh, that's because it's structurally reinforced. The problem with this advice is building code in California now is different than Mexico City in the 1980s. And our headers, like the rest of our building, also has headers. In Mexico City at the time, only the doorways had headers. And so we don't have the same risk. What will happen if you go stand in a doorway while the earth is shaking? Can anyone guess? What are you going to do with your hands while you stand in the doorway? You're going to grab the door frame where there is a swinging pendulum that will then take your fingers and make them into like smushy fingers. Right? You can already see they're trying desperately not to put their pinky through that door crack. It's not going to work. So this is old advice you don't need to listen to. The current advice, drop, cover, and hold on. So there's all kinds of advice. What to do if you're driving. Don't slam the brakes on in the middle of the highway. I don't even feel the earthquakes when I'm driving because you're moving also along with the earth. Okay, Chief, you spoiled this one for me. Should you just go ahead and run outside? It makes sense. There's all of this heavy stuff over your head here. Why wouldn't you just go outside where there's no heavy stuff? Any guesses? Yeah, there's lots of heavy stuff outside. So this is what happens to the brick fascia in a building with 4-story high brick fascia buildings if you just run outside. Those cars just got absolutely bricked. So you want to drop, cover, hold on, and then figure out what to do. In terms of the buildings, I think a lot of people have this fear that they're going to get caught in a pancake collapse, right? The roof is going to come down on you. How do you deal with that sort of thing? That's not actually a very large risk these days, especially with California building codes, but even US-wide, this just doesn't happen very much anymore. Your walls and ceiling falling completely down doesn't happen anymore. What is a real risk are soft first-story buildings, which I'll cover, older buildings that are made of concrete without rebar, predominantly the buildings that are really going to fail, and they're really going to fail hard, and this is something to consider for evacuation, parking garages. Parking garages are going to fall apart, and you're never going to get your car back out of there until 2 months later when they finally lift all the concrete slabs up again. Your chimneys, glass building materials, etc. So old construction, that pancake collapse thing we talked about comes from how they used to build buildings. They would stack up some bricks, and then it was time for a new floor. They would make one part of the bricks less deep and just stick a joist in there, and then friction held it all together. I'm from Baltimore. There are 250-year-old row houses that are still built this way. And I moved to California and then became Californian, got earthquake educated. I went back and visited my parents, and I walked into a store, and the second floor is being held up by a 12 by 12 piece of lumber resting on some bricks on either side. And it creeped me out. That's when I knew I was Californian. These get retrofitted these days by drilling through the brick and pulling together the joists all into kind of one engineered thing. So if you ever go by a brick building in San Francisco or San Jose where there's older construction, and you see those metal stars every 6 feet in a line right where the floor should be, the metal star is this piece here, and there's a bolt going through it, and it's pulling another set of supports to the wall and anchoring these things in together. And that's how they prevent that pancake collapse. Soft story buildings are still a big risk in the Bay Area. You can kind of see this one. When the shaking starts, the building is shaking this way and that way. And anywhere that there's construction that's not held together tightly in 3 directions is vulnerable. So you can probably see right here, that snapped, that snapped, that snapped, that snapped, and the whole building is leaning this way. Does anybody live in a building kind of like this one? There aren't too many on the coast. There's a lot inland. So the problem with these buildings are twofold. First of all, if there's enough shaking, the second floor becomes the ground floor because there's not enough support here. But what else happens to people who thought they were going to evacuate after an earthquake? Where are their cars? There's the parking. So something to consider. These are usually retrofitted these days by putting giant steel frames in at regular intervals to shore up when the shaking occurs. So you can kind of tell when they've been retrofitted because some of these will be a lot thicker than the others. Non-ductile concrete buildings, I mentioned parking garages. This is actually a ductile parking garage. You can see there's rebar through here. An old concrete structure would just be made of concrete, and they would stack the concrete up like Legos, and then it would fall over when it shakes. Modern buildings, they put metal rebar, so long, thin metal poles through it, and that helps hold it together. So you can see this parking garage, this part would have completely fallen over, but it's kind of being held on just by the metal rebar there. The most famous example of this is the Oklahoma City Murrah Federal Building, where a bomb went off here, and you can see the whole front part of the building came off. This was a concrete and rebar building, but the trick to this building and why the front fell off so catastrophically was building code didn't yet include instruction that the rebar had to be looped at floors. So the rebar went vertical and horizontal, but nothing tied it together at the intersections. And so when the pressure wave from the bomb goes off here, it lifted all the floors a few inches, and then all the floors fell back down a few inches onto the support they'd been sitting on, and the supports punched their way through the floors. Modern code now has the rebar being tied together at every corner, and then that would prevent this collapse from happening. So A lot of soft story buildings in the Bay Area still, this is a soft story building. Those garage doors are not providing any structural support as it goes back and forth. There's a retrofitting program if you live in one of those where you can go get help retrofitting it, but they're still not super far. Anyone have a real brick chimney? Yeah? Okay, so real brick chimneys are one of the big fallover risks. So inside the house, if you're sitting next to the chimney, this stonework can all fall apart and fall in toward you. The other thing is if you have the chimney that sticks up really far above the roof line and it's real brick, that can come off and either fall into your front yard or fall into your attic and possibly through the roof at you. So real brick chimneys are pretty looking, but you kind of want to look at whether you need to reinforce those if there's an earthquake. The other big risk, especially second story and above, is falling glass. So this is another reason why you don't just run outside during an earthquake. Say you're visiting San Francisco or San Jose or anywhere that has more than 2-story buildings. A lot of the glass panes will get partially broken during the earthquake. And then what happens? 5 minutes after, 10 minutes after, 15 minutes after, there's some wind or there's an aftershock or something else disturbs this glass. These panes in this window are going to keep coming out and falling for a long time until the windows are replaced, repaired, or duct taped over. And so even after the earthquake is over, 5 or 10 minutes or even longer, be aware of what's above you and make sure that it's not something that's going to come down and hurt you. Your stuff. That's your biggest risk during an earthquake is our stuff and these lights. Two biggest risks are our stuff and these lights. So in terms of risks, right? Don't panic. Make sure that you have community effort in terms of planning for earthquakes and know your home's hazards, chimneys, your materials. Stay close to where you are and duck and cover under something heavy, and then hold on till it's over. Those are sort of the big takeaways for earthquake preparation. After the earthquake, you're probably going to have some decisions to make. One of them is going to be, do you shelter in place like this octopus here, or do you evacuate? So there are going to be difficulties in the Bay Area with evacuation. I gave this course on the peninsula, I think it was in San Mateo, and we did a little experiment because it was a smaller class with more time, and we took a map of 101 and we tried to find what's the longest number of miles you can drive down 101 without going under an overpass. It was like 6 miles, I think, in between overpasses. If overpasses come down across the highway is not a good evacuation route. If mudslides take out the highway is not a good evacuation route. I personally feel like getting your local community and your neighbors prepared to just have a 2 to 3 week long block party for a while, as long as your homes are habitable and safe, is a way smarter move than trying to drive to Fresno and get a hotel for 3 weeks. Just because the drive to Fresno is not going to be very easy to do. Huge important one that comes a lot. Does anybody have emergency candles? There are some emergency kits you buy, and they have those little white paraffin emergency candles for light. Man, so many house fires after hurricane-based power outages are from the candles people were using for light. I think the 2 primary reasons houses burn down after a hurricane are people using candles for light and people using their stove for heat. They leave a gas stove on for heat and either gas themselves out or catch the house on fire. Do not ever use candles for your light, or at least not while they're away from your body. And don't use stoves and ovens for heat, or really anything combustible indoors. All right, more on home preparation items closer to the end, but now I want to talk a little bit about wildfires. Wildfires are California's big natural disaster. Earthquakes happen, but they're a little bit more rare. We're starting to get pretty used to wildfires. I took a quick study of wildfires, and this is non-California. This is across the whole USA, the causes of wildfires. About 25% of all wildfires were started by people burning trash and leaves in their yard. Not as much a California thing as it is a middle area thing. Arson is about 15%. Vehicles is a surprisingly large number. How does a vehicle start a wildfire? Any guesses? Exhaust, hot exhaust, so they park in dry grass and the hot exhaust catches the grass. The car itself catches on fire and then the person pulls over into the grass. I think somebody said sparks, right? Yeah. So there was a really big wildfire I was part of back east, and the cause of the wildfire, when they got back and figured out was a big rig had a chain dragging underneath it. And the chain was throwing off sparks into a dry cornfield. And then the cornfield caught fire. Lightning and unattended campfires is another 25%. Cigarettes being thrown out the window, literally like 10% of all wildfires are people throwing their lit cigarette out the car window. I saw someone do that in Frederick, Maryland once, throw a cigarette out their car window, and I saw the cornfield start to catch fire, and I was so mad at that person. Because I had to choose between pulling over and stomping the fire out, or following him and stomping him out. And I chose the fire, I stomped out the fire. I still wish I could do both. There have been some very large wildfires. The August complex fire in 2020 was more than 1 million acres, and it spread at a speed of 50 to 200,000 acres per day. Root cause was a lightning strike, destroyed over 1,000 structures. The Dixie Fire, almost 1 million acres, tree touching power lines was the root cause of that one, 1,300 structures. We had the Mendocino Fire, root cause, sparks from a hammer hitting a metal stake while someone was camping. Who could have predicted that one? 280 structures there. And the Palisades and Eaton Fire, those were very recent. Those fires actually moved at the speed of like you walking. You go take a walk down Main Street, not hurrying anywhere. That's about how fast that fire moved for 23,000 acres. And it damaged 18,000 structures because it was in a lot more populated area than the other ones I mentioned. The Palisades Fire ended up being arson, and the Eaton Fire, I think, ended up being power line-induced fire that had been previously put out, but then the roots underground were still burning hot coals, and it reignited later. The important thing for all of us in terms of defending against wildfires, well, there's lots of things you think we could do, like we could rake the forests or, like cut highways through the forests, right? Everyone has ideas on how we could prevent wildfires, but wildfires have been happening a lot longer than we've been living here, right? And as long as we're going to build houses where there's trees, wildfires are a thing. What you can do, though, is follow the guidance from the state of California and create a 5-foot ember-free zone around your house. I'm going to explain that in the next slide or two. And clear away flammable things from your home, and then make sure that your home itself isn't as flammable. So I'm going to go through this. The top reasons houses catch fire forward of a wildfire. So wildfires do this fun thing where there's a main fire, and then they cast off what we call hotspots. About 100 yards, 500 yards, a mile away from the fire, a new little fire will start. Where do the hotspots come from? The embers. All this burning stuff creates all of these hot embers that blow in the wind, and what makes it more difficult is wildfires themselves create a weather system. So the burning wildfire heats the air, creates more wind. It was the late 80s, I think, the Oakland firestorms, if you research those. The Oakland firestorms had a weather system of their own and ended up producing firenadoes, which you would think would be like the kind of thing they would put on Bro TV, like a movie, Firenado. They exist. It's a little tiny tornado of fire. So these embers blow with the wind, and the weather system created by the fire creates more wind, and then the embers land on things. And that thing is your house, or flammable things inside your house. So what you're looking at here is a test house that was built inside a lab, where they just made a fire that produces lots of embers and they blew it at the house. And then they recorded, where does this house catch fire and why? And a couple of the things they found was, number one, stuff that's stuck in your gutter. Dry leaves in your gutter, pine needles, especially in the more piney areas, will get stuck in the gutter. A hot ember will land in the gutter and then light the gutter on fire. What's behind the gutter? The nice protected dry wood underneath your shingles. So this will catch the roof line on fire. Who has tan bark up against their house as mulch? Be honest, right? So an ember landing on tan bark or dry brush or things near the base of the house will tend to catch the base of the house on fire. And then all of these sparks, does anybody have a vent, a big vent at the end of their attic? Most of you do, because that's how you keep the attic cool. If you don't have a mesh across that vent, wildfire embers blow in through the vent, land inside the house on, again, nice dry wood inside your attic. Because the whole point of the roof is to keep all the other wood dry, right? And so the embers float in through these vents, or if you have open vents here underneath where the gutter is, those nice 2x4s with holes in them to let the attic breathe. If you don't have a mesh there, embers fly through there, that's how they ignite the house. So just in terms of preparation, if you make sure there's nothing dry in your gutters and then put a gutter screen over it, if you make sure you get screening inside the soffit vents and the attic vent, and then you clear away flammable stuff from the base of your house, you've already taken care of the majority of things that cause house fires during a wildfire. That's part of a forward spot. The other thing is your fence. So, and this, I'm trying to replace my fence right now, and it's hard because I have to get 3 different neighbors to agree on a new fence, and one of them doesn't want a new fence. But my fence is old pine, like rotted old pine. I could breathe, and if I'd been running and my breath was too hot, I think I could light this fence on fire. And what's going to happen to that fence when it lights on fire is the fire is going to do what it does. It's going to go in a straight line along the fence, burning fence until it runs out of fence. Where's it going to run out of fence? At your house, where it's bolted to the nice dry wood underneath your siding. And so the wildfire can travel along the fence line. So one thing you can do to help prevent your house from catching on fire in a wildfire is take that last 5 feet of fence that goes from your fence to your house and make that out of a non-flammable material. They make a kind of wood now that's basically, I don't know, plasticized plywood pulp or something. It's really neat. My father-in-law made a deck out of it. It's non-flammable, like straight up non-flammable. Just make that 5 feet out of the non-flammable stuff, or metal, or something. Or if you have a gate, right, and you're evacuating, leave the gate open. Prop it open so that the gate is no longer the bridge between the fence fire and your house, right? Those are all really good preps you can do. Did I miss anything?
Everyone has a 1/4 inch mesh.
Yes, good call. So it's written up here, but I didn't cover it. Older houses have a 1/4 inch mesh that lets embers right through. The 1/4 inch mesh is for keeping out birds. It doesn't do that all that well either, if you go by my house, but it's best if you replace that with a 1/16 inch mesh, which is fine enough to not let fire embers through. 1/8 is like the legal minimum. Your insurance company wants to see 1/8 or smaller, but as long as you're paying somebody to go replace it, or as long as you're doing the work of sweating in your attic for yourself, put in that 1/16 inch venting. Air will still go through that, right? But fire embers won't.
Does it matter? Is it false sense of security? I have, of course, redwood fence gate, but I have a stucco house, so I think I'm fine. Am I unusual?
So stucco siding, way better than wooden siding, and better than vinyl siding. Stucco is probably the best siding material you can have in terms of wildfire because it's non-flammable and it also kind of rejects heat if you have a light paint. If you've drilled through the stucco to attach the fence to the house though, you've created an opening for the fire to get through. If your fence is kind of against the house but not attached to the house and it's just in the ground, you're better off than most people with a fence. You're just gonna, how long is it gonna burn up against the stucco for, you're much better off. Chief?
So on the stucco doesn't go all the way to the ground.
That's true too.
You have the gorilla glass, or tan bark, or anything flammable, it's gonna come in behind that stucco and start that dry wood that's got wood rot, termites and everything in it. So it's a very easy place for it to start. So that's why you have to have that zone on the ground for nothing to get on the stuff.
Great call.
It never occurred to me to leave the gate if you're evacuating. That's so obvious.
That's why we have the class, right, Lake Share. And Chief, anytime you want to step in. So Chief Cosgrave's been here on the coast for 35 years. So he's been fighting fires longer than me. And most of my active firefighting years were in Baltimore. So mostly we just did stabbings, like a lot of stabbings, not gonna lie. And row houses and trash fires. Yes?
Is the 1/16 diameter the size of the modem wire?
Yeah, so the 1/16 is the gaps in the wire. You want 1/16 size gaps. Good question. So to drive it all home, the Lahaina fires.
Yep.
All of Lahaina burned down in a wildfire in Hawaii about 5 years ago, and it was a huge tragedy. And this is what they call the miracle house of Lahaina. This one house, and the person's car also, did not burn down. Why? Well, you can see a couple of things in here. Is this a wooden shake roof made of flammable material? No. They had just renovated this house and they went with a steel roof because it was going to last longer and be easier to maintain. Wildfire preparation was not what they were doing at all. but they had installed a steel roof, which when they renovated the roof, they put good wire mesh in all of the roof vents. And then, purely because the person doesn't like tan bark, they were interviewed afterwards. They just don't like it. They had taken that 5 feet around the house and replaced it with a river rock kind of decorative thing. So those embers were all landing on non-flammable rock and a non-flammable roof, and they weren't able to get in through those vents. And even though a house burned completely down here, this house did not burn down. It was fine. There's one more thing that they didn't cover here that I want to cover. So the other reason this house did not burn down, even though this house completely burned down, even these trees, is I don't know what kind of window coverings they had, but it probably wasn't vinyl window coverings, because the radiant heat from this fire is going to travel through those windows. And if you have thin curtains, flammable window coverings, and you don't have something like steel shutters on the outside, the radiant heat can go in through the windows, catch your curtains on fire, and then start a fire inside the house still. So I don't know what kind of window treatments they had, but it probably wasn't thin and flammable. Or they have steel shutters instead of, like vinyl covers. The siding, I believe, is aluminum siding. So that was a well-built house. So, but I mean, it matters, right? Absolutely everything else to the ground. And those things, it still stood. There was no wildfire defense system. They didn't have sprinklers. It's just building material.
What about tile roofs? Those better?
Oh, tile roofs are great. Yeah, so if you have like those cool decorative Spanish-style tile roofs, those are great. The only caveat there is they have a lot of grooves where you can catch pine needles in the grooves, right? And they don't blow off in the wind. So if you have a tile roof, it is very non-flammable unless it accumulates a ton of flammable material in and under the tiles. But yeah, stucco and tile are great. So passive defenses, what you build your house out of and what is around the house, are usually great wildfire defenses. There are things you can do actively. They have sprinkler systems now that you can line the roof with sprinklers and spray the house down as the fire approaches. I saw an AI system with 2 sprinklers on a roof that spots fire and then shoots water out of it. Those are cool. They also compete with the firefighters for resources. And one of the problems at the Palisades fire was what? They ran out of water. The water system couldn't keep up with demand. So if you're hoping the active sprinkler defense system on your house, if the water goes, that sprinkler system goes. If you're really rural and you have a generator or you have a pool or a pond, you could build a system where you draw water from the pond and then have your generator go on and spray your house down constantly. That's probably more expensive though than just putting in new roof venting and having a better roof material. They also make some really cool things now, thermogels. So they make a thing you can attach to your hose sprayer, and it's made of potato starch. And you spray it along your house, and it gels up into a really fire preventative gel. I've never used it, and I don't think I've ever seen a definitive case where someone thermogelling their house kept it from burning down, as opposed to putting in better wire mesh at the vents and preventative stuff. But it's something you could research. They do make these. I haven't bought it yet, and I'm kind of a nerd for this stuff, so that's how new it is and unproven. Do you have any thoughts on thermogels, Chief?
You're gonna have the time to put it on.
Yeah. Are you going to have the time to spray your house down? You got to spend at least 20 minutes doing it.
I need to get it off.
So gradually, it will wash off with water later because it's a potato starch-based gel, so it's actually biodegradable and you can wash it off later. Yeah, and you have to repaint. So for wildfires, it's as much about the prepping in advance as anything else, just clearing those flammable materials away from your house. Wildfires move much faster than you would think, so when the evac warning comes, it's time to actually listen and evacuate. And this is the key, big thing right here. The fire could be 5 miles away, and you could already be in the ember zone, right? So keep those non-combustible zones around the house.
When the Oakland fire, my house on Spruce, I had ash that morning.
From the Oakland fire, you had ash on your house in Spruce. That's what, 20 miles? Yeah, the embers travel far. So I think Chief mentioned, I don't have it specifically in this course, Coastside itself is not a particularly fuel-rich area for wildfire, are we? we have a couple of eucalyptus groves, and Montera's got more fuel than like the downtown area, but South Coast, yeah. So the South Coast piece is not as fuel rich as anything. If you can keep the embers from lighting your house on fire, that's like the number one thing you should be doing. All right. Yes.
What about, things like ice plantings, succulents, these kind of things, are they any better than other plantings? I mean, I know people have planted ice plant areas.
So ice plant and succulents. I assume I'm not very good at garden stuff. My wife will make fun of me because I'm just at the I can usually tell when it's poison oak or not phase. I assume those are super wet plants that are like hard to catch fire. They hold water well. I would imagine plants that hold water well. What do you think, Chief?
I had a hard time finding fires at ice plant because there's a lot of dead material underneath them, and it pops up 30 feet away, like on the beaches down south. So there is that material. It does not have big open carrying flame, but it does burn. Carry. So definitely succulents are one of those things that you can't plant in 5 feet.
Yeah, and we can't all live in a concrete fortress, right? A lot of preparing for things is make the decision that works for you, right? So if you love plants and you don't want to just have a plant-free yard, that the most fireproof thing you can do is a concrete yard. But like succulents are better than dead pine needles, right? So with the caveat that Chief just said, in case you couldn't hear him on this side of the room, wet succulents like ice plant can trap and contain a bunch of dead material still. So there can be a bunch of dried pine needles in between all the succulents that can carry a low flame for a while. But better than a bed of pine material or basically juniper bushes, right? Those things, man, yeah, juniper bushes are like gasoline. They just go up. Anything pine that carries oils is essentially a torch. What's that? Yes.
I went to the lecture they did for Montera residents, and there was a comment about fire, its travel, like its pattern, and if you're high, you're at a greater risk, or if you're low, you're at which is if you're higher, you're at a greater risk.
So the question of are you at a greater risk of fire if you're higher up on a hill versus lower, that's kind of speaking to fire, fire, if you're up a hill, right, the flames they go up, right? The heat of the flames goes up. And so things that are uphill of a fire, the fire is going to crawl and go up the hill at it. So if you're at the top of a hill with a lot of vegetation, are you at more risk than someone at the bottom of the hill? Probably. But also if you're at the bottom of the hill and you have dry pine needles in all your gutters, you're probably just as much risk for members. What do you think, Chief? I'm gonna hand him the mic. This is where I'm super glad I get to pass this over to someone who has lived here for long. My secret is I only moved here 4 years ago. So here you go.
So I can never say that we have less risk, right? Because I've seen those movies and things can happen. But things we have on the coast that's going for us is fire. First of all, you need a fuel. There has to be something to burn, right? Houses are fuel. Trees are fuel, grass is fuel, all those kinds of things. Without ignition, a start, there's no fire. So you need a start, you need a fuel. If that's all it is, the fire is going to go uphill because he's talking, right? So fire wants to go uphill and it wants to follow the fuel, right? So if the tree line goes like this, it will grow with the shrubberies and the grasses. Those catch fire and burn faster. The trees burn slower, right? It takes longer to get that. So different fuel levels. I've been up to Bernie and Round Mountain and places like that to where a community was burned over 3 times. It came through the grass, it came through the brush, and then it came through the timber, right? So there's different layers of fire, and that's why they call ladder. We don't want grass to go into the bushes, to go into the trees. That's when, and then the ultimate fire that we really worry about is called a crown fire. That's when it gets into a canopy and it's like a freight train moving. Those are the fast moving ones that go in the wind. So fuel wants to follow the fuel, wants to follow the topography. What can overcome those 2 factors?
A 747 full of fire retardant.
No, it's wind, right? So on a normal day on the coast, which way does the wind blow? It comes off the ocean, right? So it's going to blow that wind uphill away from us. If we're at the top of a grove of trees and brush, On a regular day, that's always a threat to us, right? So that's a risk we have. If you're at the bottom, you're a little safer. When we have those diablo winds, when we have the big high pressure, and they say there's a red flag warning, those are going to come from the northeast towards us, right? And that's when you have, what did I say the humidity was here this morning? 66 degrees when inside here, and it's probably 90. I mean, I check the humidity every morning when I go to my hot tub because my deck's either wet or dry, and it's usually wet. Today was really wet. So that's a good thing, right, for fire. The fuel moistures are up, humidity, so it's not fire weather. It can get hot. It can change throughout the day. Grasses will dry quicker. The trees, if we've had like moisture for a long time, they'll hold the moisture longer. So the fuel that. So what I'm saying, we haven't had a red flag day in 3 or 4 years, I don't think, on the coast. That's where we get those hot, dry winds. The Oakland Hills fire was during Pumpkin Festival, right? And it was the warmest pumpkin festival we've ever had. People were in bikinis on Main Street. We don't see that often, right? And so if you see that, you know, right? We know when usually on the coast, it's like, wow, we've had 3 great days. What happens right after that? Usually we get that, all of a sudden we get the fogust or the rain, right? The liquid sunshine. But that's what protects us, right? But we know those days that are hot and different. And the main thing we have to pay attention to at night, if it's hot and there's wind, that's the night that you want to make sure your phone's on. That's the night you're aware if you smell smoke, you want to get up and investigate it, right? Those are the times. It's that fire weather, the red flag warnings, that's when you really need to worry about it. And as Matt said, you know, the protection of defending your home, there's a defensible space, which is the brush and clearance and things like that. And then there's a home hardening. Defensible space is great, but he said the fire is going to generate its own wind. So you've cleared up, you've done great housekeeping and stuff like that, but before the embers get to you, your neighbor's pine needles and leaves or that lot of those things off of the hill next to you, they're going to blow up into those places where it usually accumulates too. So you can't just depend on the work you've done there. So you have to harden the home around it. That's why the zone 0 has come in. And that's kind of so we can keep our insurance in California. They've mandated new rules. So if you go to zone 0, Google it or do your web search if you're not a Google freak. Sorry about that. You know, just get that information on that because it is a rule that's going to go into effect and be enforced within 3 to 5 years. I don't think the fire district's going to be able to come and tell you that you need to remove your gate within 3 to 5 years. I'm going to wait until I get over to do it, but I am going to open the gate if there's a fire. So that's that. I mean, you know, I don't know if I fully answered your question. There is no safest thing, but we are kind of protected on a normal day because when I got into the fire service, we were always called the asbestos county, right? They've handed it in Marin County they get more fires down there. Monterey County gets more fires. Santa Cruz County gets even more fires. We've always been the asbestos county, right? I would be more afraid if I used to live in Belmont. You know, the fires are going to go up the hillsides there. It's drier, but you know, it gets hotter. Those are the areas. I could see losing communities on the peninsula. I could see losing neighborhoods on the coastside. But it's not going to be a Palisades. It's not going to, and that's my vision. I'm not saying it can't happen because I've seen those movies. But just taking the steps that Matt just talked about will help you sleep at night and do that. So, any other questions?
Yeah, what about the fire that was up 4 years ago now, where it was a fire and it headed south to Santa Cruz?
So the CZU lightning complex. So that was started by weather, but it was lightning, right? Lightning strike. After that, we didn't have red flag warnings. We didn't have big winds. The general winds took it to Boulder Creek and Santa Cruz and stuff like that. That would have been taken care of in a day or two, and it would never. All the big fires would have never joined together if there were resources. But the problem is there were thousands of fires in California at one time. So it was a resource-driven fire, which no one's ever heard of, but that's what I'm terming it, right? We couldn't get to them with resources to put them out, right? So.
You can thank the locals for your local. So many communities.
No, Lomamar in Santa, in Bolton. Yep. So I was on a fire that would happen, the closest fire we had to us, we had little small ones we put out in the lightning, but up above Tanitas, or Levitas Creek, there was a fire that we fought for about 4 days. Every time I got an engine in service, they would take it to Boulder Creek. And I was like, I got my own fire I put it out. So we put it out with the Kings Mountain Volunteers, Lahana Volunteers. The Open Space Rangers had fire equipment. And we took an engine out of service from El Granada that went and fell a tree because one of our guys was a lumberjack, basically. So there was a tree that had been smoldering and kept trying to put it out. So we used resources to put it out. The Parks Department started the old hall rooms on the south end. But those fires were burning away from Half Moon Bay, right? There was nothing coming in our direction. So we were lucky because of the things like that. So lightning is a big factor. We're looking at it right now, right? Right now with the El Nino and all the monsoonal moisture, right? We got a hurricane going to Hawaii right now. The problem is that the Sierras are getting lightning, but that time we had the CZU lightning fires, that band came up all the way through California, hit the coastal range, right? That doesn't happen often.
If you replace a fan bar with an artificial grass, that is
The plastic will still burn. Yeah, so there's better options.
There's a phone number that we're supposed to call to like, for, clearing empty lots. And it's not,
So
do we know that number?
So this fire district has a weed abatement program, I think is what you're referring to. It would be the Coastside Fire Prevention, or Coastside Fire Protection District, the fire marshal's office. So they issue citations to people that have vacant lots. The problem is that they're gated and they have brush on them. The only thing they do is they're only allowed to get this guy that has a mowing contract, but contact the fire district. So I'm not gonna get on specific properties, but
I know in Apple Bay right now, it's the city that sends out those flyers, because we have a vacant lot, and we get these, your neighbors are complaining that your lot is so high.
so that would be someone complaining to the city building officials, I guess, but it's primarily that's enforced through the fire marshal.
Yeah, you get it through the fire, you get,
Yeah.
Much appreciated, Chief. So, and I think you mentioned it was people with bulldozers, right, saved a lot of homes during the CZU complex. That goes right back to slide number 1, right? Community preparation. There are gonna be, if we're lucky and all the volunteers are here, it's gonna be like 7 fire engines, 8 if Neil can get the 1956 pumper working. Because we haven't used the pump on it in a while, but if we can get Neil out there with engine 3, we have 8 fire engines, 560 CERTs. If we can get the number of CERTs up more, right? If we get 1,000 trained CERT members in the community, then the whole coast has like approximately the same ratio of CERTs to population as we have teacher to student ratios in classrooms. So, like, shoot for that. If we could get 1,000 CERTs, those are the people that are actually gonna bulldoze and protect structures and do all of the real work post-earthquake, post-wildfire. Especially since, like, still don't have a hospital on the coast. Hopefully we have a roster of doctors and nurses that live here and we can make a hospital somewhere. But that's what the CERT program is trying to do for the community. All right, supplies. This is probably the most misinformation-led part of the topic as well as the most controversial and everything, because there's lots of people out there trying to sell supplies, prepackage them. There's the zombie survival kits. You can buy any kind of bag you want for any circumstance. And especially, like, if you go to Reddit, the prepper community, there are some truly hilarious to me setups out there. I saw a guy showing off his awesome prepper concrete bunker, wherein he had firearms, ammunition, food, water, all kinds of storage in a concrete bunker with a heavy steel door. And I looked at that thing and I thought, all that door has to do is get off access by 2 degrees during an earthquake, and it's never opening again. It's going to get wedged into the concrete so tightly, you will need a bulldozer to open it. And so a lot of the building supplies piece is just thinking about, is this going to be usable? Do I have to spend $1 million to build a supply bunker? No. Most of it is pretty common sense stuff. So you sit there and you ask questions. What could happen? For us, it's one of 2 things. Either we need to evacuate because of a wildfire, and you need to put some supplies together and have a plan of where to go. And that's pretty unlikely, right? The asbestos, I love the asbestos counting. Especially since when I worked at NASA, my office had asbestos in it for 20 years, and I didn't know. My lungs are well protected from wildfire now. What if you didn't have access to your house? If you had to evacuate and you weren't allowed back in for some reason for a little while? What do you do if there's no cell reception? I love testing disaster preparation on the coast by just getting out stuff and trying to use it during the 4th of July parade or the Pumpkin Fest. Anybody tried to use mobile internet during the Pumpkin Festival? Doesn't work, right? So if you're sitting there at home thinking, well, if the internet goes out, I'll just get on my mobile hotspot. You and 8,000 other people at the same time. Access to clean water, right? How are you going to get that? It's just a series of questions that you can ask yourself. What you should plan for is, it's going to be hard to get places if there's major damage after an earthquake. But not just earthquakes, right? So this is the road traveled before a major quake. I think I pulled this from Turkey. This is the road after. There is not going to be any vehicle travel down that road for weeks. This was, I think, after Loma Prieta. This was a section of 280 that had come apart. You can see the FEMA shoring in there. That's a very well-constructed shore. They're missing a gusset plate on the bottom.
880, not 280.
Oh, is that 880? Sorry, 880. Again, not a local. There's some good FEMA shoring in there, though, I can tell. New York, this is a great example. New York absolutely failed to evacuate anyone after just losing power. This was just during, remember those East Coast power outages because a electrical system cascade shut down half of the East Coast? Does anybody remember what the root cause of the electrical system cascade on the East Coast was? Okay, this is a fun cybersecurity related thing. We're all talking about how to protect the electrical grid from hackers, right? It's a big topic right now. Do you know what causes 70% of all major power outages, like non-natural disaster power outages? Squirrels. Squirrels! This was a squirrel-induced citywide power outage because a squirrel bit through a transformer, fried itself, killed the transformer, and caused a power surge that went up. The gridlock was insane because without traffic lights, New Yorkers become Mad Max in an instant. So sheltering in place was the right move there, and there, and there. It's the right move a lot of the time. If your home is okay, and your community is mostly okay, but there's damage, hunker down. So there are lots of kits you can build. I don't like these very much. The only advantage to them is it's fast and easy. You can go on Amazon, buy a 72-hour, one adult evacuation kit, stick it in your closet and never use it. But a lot of the items in it are going to be kind of bad. They're not good quality. They may not fit your needs. They may not fit you. If you don't get it out and play with it and test it all, you're probably going to be missing something you need when you need it. And I'll share with you all the number one most important item from every FEMA exercise I've ever been on after this slide. When you build a kit, you go around your house, you get the stuff you think you'll need in a disaster, you buy an extra copy, you stuff it aside. You get exactly what you want and need. You can use existing equipment. Anybody have more than one hammer in the garage? Anybody have more than 10? Yeah, right? So, more than 2 rolls of duct tape. You can usually collect some of your spares and then pretend you kept them for a good reason by putting them into your disaster kit. Also, any medical supplies that you buy to put into a disaster kit can probably be part of an FSA expense. If you have a health savings account, those qualify. It costs a little bit more time than just buying a pre-built kit, but it's a good thing. All right, so there are 2 bartered for items on every FEMA deployment, and I won this. I was the king of this because I'm vegetarian. And so they'd give us these MREs, and I didn't want the meat, so I would trade the meat for your pound cake. And the 2 things I would always bring extra with and trade people for. Number 1, hot sauce. Little tiny bottles of hot sauce, because the MREs just get old after a while. We need some hot sauce. Can anyone guess what the other most frequently demanded item nobody puts in their kit is? Toilet paper is very close. Wet wipes. Bingo. I would bring an extra pack, and those were like gold. I could get a pound cake for 4 wet wipes. Because, if you don't have a shower when you want to shower, you gotta shower down with whatever you got, and those wet wipes were gold. So, that's when you build your own kit, you get to think about things like that. Like, what do I actually want? There are some contents here. I'm including a link in the slides, again, that you can go to. I shared my own disaster kit publicly with everyone, so you can go judge me and look at what I have. But, you know, the basics, a little bit of drinking water. If you're building a kit that you have to evacuate with, you still want to bring a little drinking water with you. You're going to get thirsty. You might get stuck in a bus station for a while. Some bottled water in your go bag is good. If you're hunkering at home and sheltering in place, a larger water source, some water purification tablets are good. A go bag should have a couple of energy bars, hygiene items. These are the things to bring. Because evacuating your home and trying to go somewhere else is already a miserable experience. The one thing you don't want to be is even more miserable because you don't have hygiene stuff. You can't brush your teeth for 3 days, right? Bring a toothbrush. Important things, I have cash in my go bag because ATMs aren't, like, they're not going to be up, they're not going to be functional. Also, you know, and again, Coastside, we're all very polite here. I'm not going to an ATM in Baltimore during a disaster. That's just a great way to get all my cash stolen. Even on a good day, it's not the best. Government accepted ID. So this is a big one. If there's a big enough disaster that you're taking a go bag and you're leaving, right, you may not have your wallet with you when you leave. You get woken up out of bed and you just run. You may not have things with you that you want. I keep another government ID in my bug out bag. So when I got a passport, and you know, you renew your passport, I went on a cruise, they ask you if you want a passport card for an additional like $25. And the passport card looks useless because they're like, well, it's just like a passport, except you can't use it as a passport. And I'm like, what's the purpose of that? The purpose of the passport card is it's a proof of citizenship and ID in one, just like your California Real ID. So if you get the passport card and stick it in your go bag, you are guaranteed to have a good, acceptable government form of ID for wherever you end up. Emergency blanket, first aid kits, and multi-tools, those are pretty standard. N95 masks these days are also pretty standard. That's kind of like the basic to-go kit. If you are building a little bit more because you really love outdoorsy stuff, or you want to evacuate to go camping, or if you want to get into CERT, stuff to have in your CERT bag, a change of clothes. Again, you don't want to be miserable. Some work gloves and some paracord to tie stuff down, duct tape. We have CERT walkie-talkies so that we can communicate as a CERT team with each other. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Oh, a map. Again, back down to the internet is out thing. You might print your evacuation route on a paper map and then stick that in your go bag. I also printed out all of my relatives' phone numbers and stuck them in my go bag in case I break my phone while I'm gone. There's this, it's a kind of funny little prepper motto, but it works. It's 2 is 1 and 1 is none. And that sort of means if you have 2 ways to do something, you can count on one of them being accessible to you. And if you only have 1 way to do something, you can count on that being the thing you accidentally broke. So if everyone's phone number and all my documentation is on my cell phone, I'm guaranteed to drop that down a sewer grate while pulling it out to look for my insurance info. So a printout in my bag ensures that I will have that. Comfort items, especially if you have younger kids. I very sneakily rotated one of my daughter's stuffed animals when she was 5 out of the rotation that she really liked and put it in the go bag. And then little games and things for her to play. Because if I'm gonna sit down for 3 hours and wait in line for a FEMA administrator to finally get to me and do my emergency aid, a hyperactive 6-year-old who's miserable is not gonna help my mental state. So consider, what are the members of your family gonna do? Best practices when you're building your kit, when you're going through and thinking, what am I going to need and how am I going to use it? Test your items before you need them. The kits you buy on Amazon, they'll always come with a multi-tool that looks like a Leatherman. It's like a Temu Leatherman, if you know the term. Take one of those out if you have one of those kits and try to use it to do literally anything. Pry a nail with it. I tried on one of those cheapy kit ones, and the hinge on the Leatherman pliers popped out and it fell into 2 pieces. And I was like, that was worse than worthless because I was depending on it, right? So actually get the stuff out of the kit if you pre-buy one and test it. Or if you're putting one together, make sure your stuff still works. This here is king, especially if you go to the prepper forums on the internet. Don't buy junk you don't need. just think, am I going to genuinely need this and use this if I'm down to the basics? Rotating contents, you'll be able to see when I share my disaster kit with you, I recorded the expiration date of my food so that I can go through it once in a while and be like, oh, I don't want to eat a 3-year out-of-date MRE. I already did that once on a dare at a FEMA deployment. It wasn't fun. Location with easy access. I've seen before where people have their emergency kit in the covered storage behind their automobile in a soft story building. Remember what's going to happen in a soft story building though? Whole building is going to come down on top of their disaster kit. So you kind of want it in an easy location. I have an outside the house shed at my house where I just keep that stuff in. This is an important one. If you have medications, Murphy's Law dictates that the disaster is going to happen when you have exactly 2 pills left of whatever it is you take. And so one of the things you can do is you can actually go to your pharmacy and say you want to do your prescription on a 90-day rotating basis instead of once every 2 weeks or once a month. And when you get into that 90-day fill window, they will begin letting you refill 70 days into the 90-day. And you can kind of turn that into, you'll always have 2 weeks worth of your medications available because you're refilling while you still have 2 weeks left, and it'll cycle that way. So you can build a buffer in to keep a 2 to 3 week refill buffer. Also, you should know, and this is one of the reasons why federal disaster declarations become a thing people greatly care about, even if the feds aren't sending resources your way. In a federally declared disaster, federal law allows pharmacists to distribute your controlled medications to you outside of the medication schedule or on an emergency basis. So if you run out of something that you desperately need, a pharmacist can fulfill it for you even if the computers are having trouble, or you're technically not allowed to refill for another week. If you come in and say, hey, my medications, I'm going to need more because we're evacuating, can I get some? Once the disaster declaration hits, they're allowed to refill that for you. Shelter-in-place stuff is a little bit more intense than a go bag. If anybody wants to share, who has water stored for after an earthquake? Where is your water stored? Like in a van, in a shed in the back. Is it bottled water?
Blue.
A blue barrel? Ooh, good. I love it. Filtered water and water filter. And
Can I add also, there's a device you can buy that pulls water out of the air, and if you have power, you can generate 8 gallons a day.
you can do, it's dehumidifying water condensers. You can do water distillators at home. Those both require electricity, which we'll get into. There's also desalinators. We live near a really great water source of undrinkable dirt water. But you could get a desalinator, and I would also distill that because there's, E. coli in the water too sometimes. So those blue water barrels somebody mentioned, those are like the king of water storage. 55 gallons. It's made out of HDPE plastic, which doesn't leach chemicals. It's blue, so everybody knows it's potable water and not like oil or gasoline. I've also had good luck cycling water often out of a rain barrel, with the caveat that if you're going to drink rain barrel water, you need to purify that really well, with a distillator or a good solid water purifier, or boil it. And if you don't wash the rain barrel once in a while, you will accumulate roof shingle gravel in the drinking water storage. So filter it really well if you're going to do that. Water heaters, raise your hand if you have a tanked water heater. Okay, so the cool thing about tanked water heaters, if you strap it properly, which we went over in slide 2, and it doesn't fall over, break, and leak everywhere, a tanked water heater is about 30 to 50 gallons of potable water that gets recycled often as you use it. The caveats are, water heaters typically store water at a temperature that bacteria can thrive in if you don't have it hot enough. And so you need to maintain it well. If you're going to drink water out of the water heater, shut that shut-off valve right after the earthquake and keep it there as potable water. Once it starts to cool down into the bacterial growth zone, you just need to have purification tablets to make sure that you kill all the bacteria. And also, if you never drain your water heater, maintain it by draining it once in a while, it'll be 10% rust by the time, 10% rust, calcium, and aluminum by the time you try to drink it. So if you're going to depend on your water heater as a source of water, you do need to properly maintain it so that it's good, clean water when you're going to try to drink it. What about pools and hot tubs? Good. Nobody's going to try to drink from their pool or hot tub. I wouldn't, because again, if you have terrible gastrointestinal upset during an emergency when there's no doctors or hospitals around, you're not going to be very happy. The chlorine level in pools and hot tubs, as well as the chemical level in there, is definitely too high to drink straight out of. You could purify it, but like a regular Sawyer water filter or a camp filter isn't going to be taking out the chlorine levels, and it's not going to be taking out some of the other pool chemicals. So if you want to rely on pool and hot tub water, you need a power source and a distillation method so that you can distill that back into pure water. Which, if you have those, it's great. It's like 300 gallons for a hot tub and a lot of gallons for a pool. But you can't drink that stuff straight, and you can't just drink it through a can filter. You will get terrible cramps. Food. Who has 2 weeks worth of food stored at home? I have 2 weeks worth of leftovers in my fridge. If I can keep my fridge powered, I have a lot of food available, right? You don't have to buy 2 weeks worth of MREs and camp food to prep for this. You just have to make sure you know, hey, how long could I make the current food that I have in my house go? And maybe stock up on some things. Rice and beans for vegetarians, stock up on whatever it is that would keep longer. Peanut butter is fantastic. It is a good vegetarian protein, high calorie, high fat, lasts a long time. I love peanut butter for disaster prep stuff.
What is an MRE?
MREs? Okay, MRE stands for meal ready to eat. It's the food that all U.S. soldiers get on deployments that fits exactly into the cargo pocket on the pants. It's also the food that all FEMA people get on deployments. I think Chief Cosgrave brought a civilian equivalent. It's called a heater meal. This is zesty white chicken chili. And what's great about these things is they come in a pack. This pack is one good solid meal worth of calories. It's balanced, it's healthy, sanitary, and it comes with a heater, so you can heat it up.
Does all that require water to marinate?
Everything after disaster requires water, right? You need to store a good amount of water. About a gallon per person per day and your pets is the minimum. But I would store more than that for things like if the plumbing system hasn't broken and the toilet water goes somewhere not your yard or your street, you can flush toilets with the pool and hot tub water, right? If you're not drinking it, you can use that for lots of stuff.
I have a question about water.
Yes?
If you store water, let's say, we can store 30 gallons in our van. If we put it in and don't use it, or any barrel, water doesn't look bad technically, but what do you rotate out?
How often do you rotate water? And for me, it depends on the container, right? A cheap plastic barrel is going to leach pet plastic into it over time. I cycle it every couple of months. One of those blue water storage barrels, I think they're good for years, as long as you keep it properly sealed.
But you still put tablets in it.
You still put tablets in it, right? It should come with instructions, whatever method you get. Very good question. The MREs are very portable, very good. What I like about them is they come with all the things you need, and they're designed not to upset your stomach, and they're also designed to stick with you for a while and be good energy. They can get a little old after a while, like eating the same MRE for 2 weeks. You might want some variety.
They're also on sale right now at Costco.com.
On sale at Costco.
100 meals for $70.
There's also a website, Earthquake Essentials, that sells consumer versions of the MREs that are good. And I like them because I'm vegetarian. The vegetarian penne pasta MRE is like an unsung hero of the MRE world, because the vegetarian meals they actually had to put some thought into, and they thought about how it would taste too. So, Scott?
I'm pretty sure that the military MREs are not rehydrated, right?
Well, so the military MREs, you don't need water to eat, but so we have this thing called, in FEMA, called the MRE Cracker Challenge. So you take the crackers and peanut butter that come with the MRE, and you just try to see how many crackers you can eat without drinking water after. Has anybody ever heard of hardtack from the Civil War? My maximum number of MRE crackers I can eat without water was 1. So the MRE is designed to be not you don't have to use water to rehydrate it, but you're going to need drinking water with it. Yeah. There's also, Costco has food kits. The thing about buying the big kit then is, again, you're sort of getting their default idea of what an American would eat kind of thing, and you got to figure out how to make deals from it. Whereas if you put together a kit of yourself, or you just buy more beans, I make really good chili. I make a really mean chili. So I just have a lot of good beans, and I know where to get tomatoes and stuff, and I can make a week's worth of chili on the amount of stuff I've got stored. So planning for the food, again, I have my kit available for you all to look at the kind of things I have. It's not a one-size-fits-all kit. It's just for reference. This is an important one. Try to stockpile food you'll want to eat. Remember, what was it I said is really important about living through a disaster? Is it pleasant? It's not pleasant. Do you want to make it more unpleasant for yourself by buying like those 3,600 calorie ER bars, they call them, those little weird lemon bars that come pre-made in all the bug out bags? Those things are literally designed to be eaten while lost at sea. You're not going to like eating those. Your kids aren't going to like eating those. Your pets aren't going to eat those. Try to stockpile food you will actually want to eat after a disaster so that you don't have just misery after misery. You know, a Snickers bar means wonders if you're having a really rough day. Have a couple of, see how long they last, throw them in your kit. For heating and cooling, fortunately here on the coast, cooling is not as big of an issue as it is like if I give this talk in San Jose. They have some pretty hot days there, or Tracy. For heating, the simplest thing you can do to stay warm post-disaster if you don't have electricity is just close the bedroom doors to all the rooms you're not going to be in, and then all stay together in the room you're going to be in. Because your body heat will heat up a room, and if you're not trying to heat the whole house, then whatever fuels you're using for a heater are going to go a lot farther. That said, there is one indoor rated propane heater, right? Never bring a grill indoors and light it to try to stay warm. You're going to carbon monoxide yourself to death. But there's one, it's called the Big Buddy heater, that has an integrated CO sensor and an oxygen sensor, and it will auto shut itself off if it's creating an unsafe environment. And it has a tip over sensor, so if it falls over, it stops. That's pretty much the only one that I would trust to be indoors with. And again, a small one and a little get 1 pound tank of propane, and then just close the door to the rooms you don't want to be in. Let those rooms get cold without you in them, and you can heat up the one room you're in. Sweaters and blankets are underrated. My daughter will be like, I'm cold, turn the heater on. I'll be like, you're in a tank top, put something on. I think that's been a father-daughter argument going back to like cave people time. Light fire, be cold. No, wear animal skin. Fireplaces, if they're still functional, are actually good for heat. We have a wood-burning fireplace at our house. If it was still good, I would use it. Portable fans need electricity to run, and air purifiers if wildfire smoke is a problem. Questions?
I just want to add on the food part,
Mhm.
I do a lot of nuts and seeds and dried fruits.
Nuts and seeds and dry fruit. Those are good because they are also high calorie, right? They will keep you up. One of the things you should keep in mind too is those emergency food kits you buy with the 9 square bars, those are a 1,200 calorie food pack. That's the minimum that NATO says you need to live. After a disaster, I would like to do more than live. I would like to help my neighbors. I would like to dig my stuff out from under any rubble that exists. Working to dig my stuff out or to help my neighbors, that's going to burn calories. As a rescue professional, I need about 3,600 to 4,000 calories a day for the amount of work I'm going to do. So if you have it in mind that you're going to do some work after the disaster to fix your house or get your belongings or help your neighbors, consider that in the food sort of the equation too. 1,200 calories a day won't be enough. Yes?
You may get this later, I don't know if the risk is portable management.
Yes.
Anthony pointed out to me at least that there's a teaching program to repay $8 for like little
Okay. Yes. All right. Yes, I am almost there on power. You got me. So I have a redundancy philosophy in terms of like how am I going to have electricity and power things. And that is I like to have one fuel that runs everything. So I'm actually pretty pro propane in this sense because my generator will run on propane. My barbecue grill will run on propane so I can cook. My indoor Mr. Buddy heater also runs on propane. So I can stock a little bit of propane and not have to worry about where I'm going to get gasoline. But you know, the difference between storing 20 pounds of propane in these nice, safe, rated steel tanks versus trying to put 20 gallons of gasoline in my garage and hope that doesn't backfire on me one day, pretty big difference. So I try to stock propane, and I have a propane generator. Most of the things in my house are electric. I electrified my washer, dryer, my stove. I have an induction range because my plan for sheltering in place, if my house is okay, is I put a transfer switch in and I just power my house on generator. That was the older plan. I have a battery thing now.
Some of these generators, you can actually have 3 phases. You can run off gas, propane, or you can actually hook up to your gas line.
Yeah, they make tri-fuel generators too. Those are also great. The only reason I didn't go with the natural gas tri-fuel and hook it up to my gas line is probably after a large enough earthquake, we're going to get a disruption in the natural gas delivery, but I can still have tanked propane in my house. So that was kind of the math I went with on that.
What if your house is, gas fireplace and gas heater,
Should you turn off gas after an earthquake? That's a great question. I'm going to, in advance, offer to let Chief Cosgrave correct me if I screw this up. But I believe the current advice is, unless you smell gas, you should not turn off your gas, because turning it back on again requires the utility to come out and help you, and they are going to be overwhelmed doing all the other things. Did I get that right, Chief?
Yep, as long as there's no damage to your house or you smell gas.
Yep. They add that rotten egg smell to the gas so you'll be able to smell it. So if there's no damage to your house and you don't smell gas leaking, just leave your gas on. It'll save you a lot of trouble. Because afterwards it could take the utility weeks to come back and turn it on for you because they're going to have more pressing issues. A manual transfer switch. So you don't actually have to spend $10,000 getting an automatic Generac generator configured for your house and everything, and you don't have to spend $30,000 on a huge house battery kit. A transfer switch is a manual switch you can install. Let's see. So this was my house in Sunnyvale. I put a manual thing you plug the generator into on the wall, and I had a transfer switch wired in. This switch is designed so that my house can either be on the utility power or the generator, but never both at the same time, so that it is safe to use. This whole thing cost $600 to install. And then I could just, on the occasion when the power went out, plug my generator into the wall, plug the propane into the generator, and I was up and running again with electric. Of course I used a licensed electrician. I actually did. I didn't have time to do it myself. So if you buy a generator, a dual fuel or a tri-fuel is a good bet. The other thing about generators, if you don't use them often, if you're running on gasoline, your generator has a carburetor. The carburetor gets gummed up, and then the generator doesn't work when you want it. If you use a propane generator, there is no carburetor to get gummed up, and so they tend to be a little more reliable starting it after you've never used it for a year. And your gasoline ages, right? After a year of storage, gasoline is not very good anymore. Propane is much closer to indefinite.
Unless you buy super fuel.
Yeah, super fuel stabilizers can make the gas last a little longer too. Do not connect a generator to your house without a transfer switch. If the house has a generator on it and you don't disconnect it from the grid, what can happen? Worse, you can kill the PG&E people, because the line people are going to be up trying to restore electric to your house, and when they get it connected again, you're going to backfeed the grid, and you can shock them because they think the power's off upstream of them, but your power is backfeeding the grid. So you always must have a transfer switch. And as Chief Cosgrave mentioned, did I have it installed by a qualified electrician? Yes, because I wanted to make sure it was done right so I don't kill the PG&E guy or woman. Also, never run them indoors. Important for storm mode. If it's raining really hard and you want to use a portable generator, but you're worried the generator will get wet and short out, should you run the generator in your garage where it's covered? Never! Because carbon monoxide kills, and it kills silently. And if you're running it in your garage, it's going to seep in to gaps in your wall or your heating and cooling system, and it's going to travel into the house. You never run generators indoors, period. Indoor, there are a kind of indoor rated propane heater that you could run. That's a heater, not a generator. None of them, California technically doesn't certify any of them for running indoors. So I will note, in a truly bad disaster where things have fallen apart a little bit, running a generator kind of announces you as this person has electricity. So what I would do, because I'm a sharing kind of person, is I would size my system to share with my neighbors, as opposed to trying to hide the fact that I have a generator from anybody. But that is a note, if you, again, Coastside is polite, but if you live somewhere less polite. Let's see, where did I must have lost it. I had a picture of it somewhere here, but there's one thing you should never, ever, ever do with generators. Has anybody ever seen like a cable that's got prongs on both ends?
Mhm.
Right, you plug prongs into one end and you can plug the other prongs into your house. We call that a suicide cable because it's highly dangerous, because people will make mistakes with those. The reason it is illegal to manufacture and sell an electric cord that is prong on both ends is because when you plug one end into the wall and hold the other end, it becomes a live conductor into you. And people kill themselves doing this. They make them at home and then they die from electrocution. Never, ever, ever make one. But there is one fun thing you can do. So if you go to like the kind of hardware store where the people really know what they're doing and know how to build stuff, you can go in, show them a picture of one, and then say, hey, can you show me how to make one of these? And just watch their brain explode. That's kind of fun. But warning, Home Depot and Lowe's will actually ban you from the store if you ask them to make you one. Because it's such a huge liability issue. They don't want to even sell you the parts. If you ask a Home Depot employee, can you help me make one of these? They have to ask you to leave. So that's pretty fun. How do I know that? I know a guy that got banned from Home Depot.
What the heck are people thinking?
That is a good question. So, and I'm just going to say, as a, again, public safety professional chief, what percentage of the calls have you been on where you thought at least once, what were you thinking?
Pretty much the majority, that's why we have fire service.
Yeah, more than 50% of all fire calls are kind of a what the heck were you thinking call.
So where I've seen the suicide cord is people have an outbuilding, they put like a floodlight there, they have a floodlight in the house. They get those little screw-in adapters that you can put on a light socket that makes it a plug. And they plug in from one to the other with the cord going across their yard to power that outbuilding.
If there's one thing firefighters have seen a lot of, it's crazy electrical setups run by amateur electricians.
And of course we saw it because of our fire.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, never do that. Batteries, this is the new hotness. You don't even have to have a generator. I think some states are still providing rebates for battery systems. This is a whole house battery system. This is what I ended up installing at my house when I finally got around to it. My solar feeds the batteries. When the grid goes down, this automatically just deals with it and feeds the house from batteries. It can last a couple of days. This one even has a nice little system where I can plug a portable generator into the back and recharge the batteries while the house is still on. It's a very neat system. This up here is an automatic fire extinguishing exploding ball. But it doesn't need it because these batteries have extinguishing gel in them. This is a cool system, kind of expensive. You can also get camp batteries. These little EcoFlow batteries, I think, have 3 kilowatts each. That'll run your refrigerator for a few days off of just one of those, provided you don't leave the fridge door open all day, right? And you conserve the energy. Those are really great. You can charge them off the wall power before storms hit, right? Storm mode is what these are really good for. Wait till the wind hits about 15 miles an hour. Go ahead and top these things up, and then when it hits 60 miles an hour and Montero loses all power again, you run off that for a little while. I have a blog post here that I wrote for people that kind of goes over how this system works if you wanted to try to build one. Little camp batteries, I think you mentioned you can get a $300 rebate for little camping batteries just for preparation.
Since Monet gave me the lead in on the Anthony, so be aware, and this ties in, every single one of us is eligible for this PG&E rebate because we're on a circuit that they can turn off in the event of a fire spark. So everybody in this room, if you pay PG&E, is eligible for a $300 rebate, and it can apply towards a generator, or it can apply towards one of these battery packs. They have to be, unfortunately, smaller, 1 kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
But that's still a trip. Basically, you can get one for $300. You get the $300 rebate for free. You can buy solar pins for $100, and something like that. None of this is going to power a house like, Matt's got the Cadillac set up there. But you can go a long way towards LED lighting and recharging your radios and a whole bunch of tremendous future comforts with just a $100 solar panel and this free battery. And in my mind, anybody that cares about this at all ought to be getting it.
100%. Yeah. So communications wise, right, I mentioned we all try to use our cell phone as a hotspot when the power goes out and then find we're one of 8,000 people doing it. I did want to throw a note in here. The CEO of Starlink is a controversial figure these days, so don't hate me too much, but these Starlink satellites make incredibly good reserve internet connection setups, especially for the CERTs if you want to put together like a neighborhood internet point for people to contact their loved ones and let them know they're okay. One Starlink on a tall pole can get my whole neighborhood email access again. And they're pretty good. This is the old version of a disaster kit loaded for a FEMA flight, but they actually make a Starlink Mini that's like way smaller these days. And if you really don't want to do the Starlink thing, I think Amazon is coming out with a competitor soon as well. Everybody's pre-bought kits come with these little emergency radios that have a hand crank flashlight and an AM/FM radio station. You can usually get some news broadcasts on those after a disaster. If you can manage to swing the internet though, the Red Cross and FEMA, it's not called Twitter anymore, I should update these slides. There's also an American Red Cross app you can get that broadcasts emergency notifications and things. But also, I think Coastside Radio, hopefully they'll still be up and running after a disaster. I would probably just try to hit the AM Coastside radio station and listen for news, because I'm imagining the fire EOC is going to work with them. And then hams. One of the things we have that's unique on the coast is the CERTs, again, this community disaster survival thing. They have a system where within the neighborhood, all their volunteers have radio walkie-talkies, and then most of the neighborhoods should have a ham radio operator who's going to connect the neighborhood to the fire station down here. And the fire station is going to get connected to San Mateo County, and they're all going to have a good communication network there. So if you don't have Starlink or Starlink doesn't work for some reason, our fallback of all fallbacks is the CERT radio network with the ham radio operators. If you are a CERT, after your disaster, check in with your neighbors on the walkie-talkie, and then you got to fill out your Form 214 activity report if it's a big disaster and you're going to start doing the neighborhood command post. Activate by protocol, fill out that form, check in, and then find your neighborhood ham. Hopefully they didn't go on vacation.
What's the channel?
Your neighborhood has its own channel. Scott, do you know where they can find the information on their neighborhood channels?
I do. CoastSideCert.com/walkie-talkie.
CoastSideCert.com/walkie-talkie. Okay, that was a lot. I know that was a lot. But I do have a little bit more time for QA. What do I have, like 5 or 10 minutes at most? Any questions I didn't cover? I saw you first.
Well, some story, I know in San Francisco we have everything like that. On the coast side, if we have rooms filled with public garage, is that a point of probability?
That is a great question. So if you have a room built above a garage, how stable is that structurally? I would have to look at your garage to know. But the vast majority of garages that have a garage door with a long open span do not hold up well in earthquakes, unless they're braced on both sides with something. I think that the official brand is the Simpson Strong Tie, but there's a kind of structural reinforcement you can put on either side of the garage door that's made of steel. It's called a Strong Tie. That brings it up to much better standard of earthquake safety. So if you have a bedroom above a garage with a big open span, the two things I would check are the floor joists actual load-bearing floor joists, or was the room built unpermitted and it's on weak joists? And then I would check to see if there's strong ties in all the corners of the garage so that it has a strong box support. Good question. I don't know who was first. I think I saw you, and then...
You had an oblique reference in your earlier slides to sanitation on emergency supplies.
Yes.
Our favorite topic. Assume the toilets cannot be flushed, that they're plugged and you can't use your toilets. What's a good approach for your 3 days plus?
Good approach for sanitation. That's a great question, because pooping in a hole only goes so far, and if you dig the hole too deep, it's bad for the environment. One of my disaster kit items that I bought for $10 was a toilet seat that fits on a 5-gallon bucket, and I have a bunch of trash bags stored in the bucket with a toilet seat on top of it. And so I have a emergency toilet with a blue chemical you can pour in before you tighten the bag that's supposed to kill everything in there. And so I basically have a camp toilet at home for everybody and enough trash bags and blue chem to make it last a while. Yeah, that was a solid question. Pun not intended.
If I don't have an outdoor shed, where am I storing my propane tank?
If you don't have an outdoor shed, where to store your propane tank? Out over my skis a little bit, because this is like fire safety type stuff. I think small amounts of propane tank are safe to store in your garage. You just don't want to load up like a 100-pound propane tank. The county has a specific guidance. If you search for San Mateo County propane storage, it'll tell you how much you're allowed to have in a garage, and then if you have more than that, how far the setback is supposed to be between that tank and your house. It's a pretty large amount though. I think under 400 pounds of propane they don't really have any standard for. So don't store so much that it would blow up your house, and if you do, put a placard on the outside of your house so we know not to go in it.
Is the house next door to yours for sale?
You know, so funny story, the house on the other side of mine is an open lot that is for sale. And when we talk about like the community survival thing, one of the really great things about getting together with your neighbors to talk this through is, I have a wicked, great, I have electricity until the cows come home, but water storage is a little bit of a problem. My neighbor's house has a well. So I just told him, I'll run an extension cord over to your house, I'll run your well for you, and we get all the water in a share, right? And so just knowing one neighbor gave me and him a plan together for how to get clean water, even if the water system, the municipal water system is shut down.
They need to put in a transfer switch for their well power.
They need a transfer switch for their wall power?
Well power.
Oh, well power. They're on city water, they just still have an old well out there. So we're gonna do a little amateur electricianship. What about creek water? As a last resort, I have a Sawyer water camp filter. I would drink out of the creek as a last resort, but I would know that I'm getting some heavy metals as I do it, so I wouldn't do it for too long. Any counter opinions from the CERT crowd?
Agricultural runoff.
Yeah. Agricultural runoff, it's not going to be great for you, but it's better than, if you don't have a desalinator, it's better than seawater. So depends a lot on which creek too, yeah. Very good questions.
For water storage, we have a big bag that you put in your tub.
Oh yeah, the tub one.
Yeah, then if you got enough warning, you can fill it up. I think it's 30 gallons.
Yeah, so for storm mode especially, because honestly, the big thing we have here is around every, December, January, there's a big storm that knocks power out for a while. They make a plastic water storage bag that goes in your bathtub. You fill it up from your bathtub, put a cap on it, and you got like 30 to 50 gallons of water sitting there, and then when the storm has passed, you just let it go down the tub drain again. Those are cool.
They are.
And they're really great. You know, for a lot of the country too, your disasters are predictable. Hurricanes come at you very slowly. Tornadoes, you kind of get a tornado warning ahead of time. Like there are a lot of disasters other than earthquakes where you've got a good solid warning that it might be coming, and those plastic bags are great for that.
Where do you buy
And where do you buy it? Amazon?
it? Amazon. Yeah,
Or I bet Earthquake Essentials has it. If you don't like Amazon, you can probably find those on the Earthquake Essentials site.
And I now realize the portable toilet, they'll dribble up for hunting supplies and rafting supplies.
That's right, hunting and rafting supply stores too.
There's also bags,
Yeah.
one at a time, but for camping.
Yeah. I had one back there.
I've heard that you're not supposed to drink dehumidifier water. Does someone know why that is? And
Like from your dehumidifier in the house? It's probably just bacterial growth, right? I imagine you don't clean that often, right?
well, yeah, I mean, I have a portable one I run. I also have a whole house dehumidifier. It makes about 100 gallons of water every month.
I would research that. Like, what I
It could be that, or it could be that it doesn't have what you need in it. Water that you drink is not just distilled water.
it may not have the right minerals.
If you were to drink distilled water all the time, you would end up with cardiac arrest.
Yeah, so distilled water is not safe to drink for a long period of time, but you can also add mineral tablets back to it or have a lot of salt. I would want, my email address is on the slides here. I would love to know if you do some research and say, hey, actually dehumidifiers are great because I might buy one.
I think that's a great idea, because I get out of one closed dinner, a gallon every 4 days sometimes. And it's a storage bed with art and other things in it, bedding and.
I should get one of those for the room that has my cello in it.
100%. Yeah, I moved the thing around the house and see what room you did and keep it all in our closet.
I think I might be at exactly time. Am I out of time? Chief, do you have any closing things you wanted to go over?
I don't want to see.
No, I'm good. I'll be all around for questions, and my email address is up there.
Thank you, Matt. So, what's the most important thing for you to do now that Matt's told you all this? To Baltimore? No. Take a step, right? He showed you that back, and he showed how to just add things slowly. Do something. he gave you several things, and you're gonna get this slide set that we'll put on Coastside CERT,
Yeah, we'll put it up on coastsidecert.com.
right? And just, take that first step to do something, because you can listen to this all you want, but you're not gonna benefit unless you take the initiative to start doing one or two things. And other than the generators, some of those big ticket items, most of them are just not a lot of cost.
Yeah, 100%. A lot of this is stuff you can work out around the kitchen table, write down, and then you're better off than you were. There's 2 more questions, and I think we literally lose this building at noon, so I think we all have to go.
Would you recommend compostable?
Compostable toilets? Probably, yeah, if you get used to using them.
So, take the time to go down, get the keyboard,
Uh-huh.
and to go back over. Well, no.
Yeah, make sure your emergency fruit supply doesn't just become the local mouse supply.
So
We had one of our firefighters get a brand new pair of